Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Talks with Walt. We now turn to the next in our series in inscriptions, poem actually number 17. The Ship Starting will be the title here. Now, this one will immediately make us start to think about our study of Plato's Republic, especially Book 6. Go back and look at those lectures on learnstrong.net, and more particularly the idea of the ship of state as it's introduced. Ships and sailing and the symbolism of ships are going to be significant all the way to maybe Walt Whitman's most famous poem, although he detested the poem by the end of his life, "Oh Captain, My Captain," where America is imagined as a ship, and of course Lincoln its great captain. Now the assumptions that we'll go through here quickly are ones that I think are important. I hope that you've been following earlier lectures already given in our Talks with Walt, as we're calling them, our guided readings through the Leaves of Grass. We'll actually talk about this project of trying to read through every one of the poems of Leaves of Grass as a certain kind of ship that is starting. Of course, we're in inscriptions, so everything is about starting, everything is about beginning and all of that. We want to remind ourselves, we are the stories that we tell and retell. We're also the stories we decide to accept or reject, and because that's the case, we're always trying to learn by connecting new information to old information in meaningful ways. The new is the new, the NEW is the KNEW. Our annotative approach will try to answer three guiding questions. What does the text say? What does the text mean? How can I relate in some ways to that information? And we're always asking about our big five in 303 when we need a text. What does this text say about epistemology, what one can know, ontology, who one is, psychology and sociology, those studies of the individual and collective mind, and finally the question of theodicy. Why is it that there must be pain and suffering in the world, and how can it be propedeutic? How can it be instructional, didactic? Finally, we'll look at Whitman through five prisms of Whitman, the five P's as we call it. Whitman is person, Whitman is poet, Whitman is pedagogue or teacher or instructor, Whitman is politician, and finally Whitman is philosopher. I mean, I've already mentioned, for example, Plato's Republic. It's interesting to pick up, especially Whitman's notebooks, and to recognize the number of times he's making references, we would call it learning, right? References to prior thinkers and prior ideas. We're going to see this played out here as well. Now, for just a little bit of background information, and again, we love to go to our Nortons for this background information. The Ship Starting was originally in the 1865 Drum Taps poem. The Ship Starting was grouped with Paumanok in the 1871-76 and was finally transferred to inscriptions, of course, in 1881. Now, let's turn to the poem itself, The Ship Starting. Again, this will be this notion of starting as beginning. Inscriptions was designed as being a kind of introduction to how to read Leaves of Grass. So we're going to see lots and lots of carryover here. Now, I want to point out, and any number of theorists, I'm always thinking of Harold Bloom as I'm giving these kinds of lectures because of the influence he's had on us in 303 to pay attention to Whitman's power when read aloud. For example, let me give you just a hint of what I'm suggesting, then we'll just read the poem. Hear all the, what we call in linguistics, the hard sibilants, all of the S sounds that will play out here. I mean, you can see it in the title, The Ship Starting. Now, I'm not going to emphasize these right now. I'll do it later when we're actually exegeting the poem. But let's just try and hear the beautiful melodic quality. And what do waves sound like when they are moving back and forth? We have to go to our T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets and Dry Salvages to play around and hear some more of that melodic quality of Eliot's poetry. As I have said many times, I think Eliot borrowed a whole lot from Whitman that maybe he himself didn't even realize. The ship started. Lo, the unbounded sea, on its breast a ship starting, spreading all sails, carrying even her moon sails. The pennant is flying aloft as she speeds so stately. Below, emulous waves press forward. They surround the ship with shining, curving motions and foam. Now, we have said already what I will say again, and I will say a number of times through our time together with Walt. It's amazing what he pulls off in just a few short lines and a few short words. It is clear that he's a great craftsman of the way in which he will produce sound, which is why so many poets continue to go back and just study the genius of the way he puts sounds together. Now, we've said in earlier lectures that when you pick up Conrad's Heart of Darkness, you have Marlowe sitting on a boat tied to a dock on the Thames, and of course, what is that boat doing? But it's kind of rocking with the rhythms of the Thames. And when you pick up and you read aloud the prose of those opening words, paragraphs, pages of Heart of Darkness, you will begin to hear a certain kind of movement or rhythm. I will argue the same is happening right here, where we're going to emphasize waves, and we're going to be playing around with S sounds that will play that out. But let's begin actually with the first word, lo. Now this is a religious word, it is a word of respect, it is also a word of awe or reverence. Lo, as in whoa, as in wow. And then the unbounded sea. Now this notion of unbounded, this idea that you can't put a limit on the potentialities that are a part of Leaves of Grass, we've seen this before and here we are again. Of course, we have two metaphors playing with each other here. The sea and the ship that will be sailing on the sea, yes? On the sea's breast, notice all the S sounds now. A ship starting, spreading all sails, carrying even her, notice the feminine use for the ship, moon sails. In other words, we are ready to go out on an adventure. Now you cannot help but read these lines and think about Tennyson's Ulysses in that dramatic monologue. We've talked about this elsewhere at learnstrong.net. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sails. There gloom the dark broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine, and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. Notice all of the S sibilants even in that set of lines. And obviously this is a set of lines that Whitman knew very, very well. Whitman loved his sea, and he loved to walk next to the beach, and he loved to hear the sound of the surf. So we're going to hear a lot of that here. And obviously it makes sense for Whitman to be working with a metaphor like boats and sailing, because everyone knew what he was talking about, the chief form of transportation to get to and from the continent, right? Lo, the unbounded sea on its breast, and we think about Wordsworth's the world is too much with us, as he will talk about the sea bearing its bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours and are gathered now like sleeping flowers. So we're playing around with this chest, this breast idea. We're going to come back to this anatomical Whitman, as we sometimes will refer to it. He loves the chest, he loves the breast, he loves to be able to emphasize it. He'll talk about the sea then as having a body itself. Notice the ship starting, which is our title, spreading all sails, carrying even her moon sails, the potentialities, the pennant, the flags, flying aloft as she speeds so stately. This idea that here again, we can say that the she and the ship here is Leaves of Grass, or we could be talking, of course, about the ship of state, that is to say America. It can go either way, and that's the genius of the metaphor, right? Then the dash, which will immediately make us think of Emily Dickinson. Below, emulous, that is to say, imitative, the emulous waves, the power of imitation, one wave after the next. Waves press forward. Again, here's our Darwinian evolution, this notion of progress and everything's going forward. They surround the ship, obviously the waves, with shining, curving motions and foam. In other words, the sea is buoying up there's a relationship, right, between the sea and the waves. We are, if you will, moving along. There's a certain kind of excitement in this poem. It's surprising that there are no exclamation points at the end of this one, but there's a certain dynamism. And here the way in which the rhythms bring us quickly to that dash, and then the pause, and then beyond the dash is the word below, and then we're playing around then with the waves themselves. Well, to finish here at 2a, all journeys obviously have to start somewhere. We might even ask about the very journey that you are taking with our study of Talks with Walt, right? If you have said to yourself, I think it would be good for me, good for my soul, for me to sit down and read and study every poem of Leaves of Grace, of grass. That is a pretty daunting activity, no question. And kudos to you for even imagining the potentiality of a journey like that. Well, those journeys all have to start somewhere. We're in inscriptions. We're obviously early on, but we're already looking forward as we're coming now to the end. I mean, this is poem 17 of 24. And of course, the next poem will be the great, great poem, I Hear America Singing. And so we're already playing games of where this ship is headed. At 2b, obviously, the symbolism of the ship is powerful, the symbolism of the sea as well, and obviously the sound of all these S's. Now, the real question is, why would Whitman do this? And maybe one of the answers is, well, think about the sound that waves make as they are on the sea itself. At 3a, we've mentioned Plato's Republic. I think it's always standing in the shadows, and of course that notion from Republic 6 of the idea of ship of state as Plato was playing the game. I've mentioned Tennyson's Ulysses. Hey, I want you to put this in your notes, guys. Whitman will make references to ships and sailing and seas all the way through his poems. I'm thinking, of course, I mentioned already, "O Captain, my Captain," but now I'm thinking about Passage to India. Write that one down, and when we get there, we'll come back to remind ourselves, hey, do you remember in Inscriptions, we were already playing around with the idea of sailing, journeying. Obviously, we have to say this. Anytime you're thinking about sailing and journeying, you're obviously thinking about the greatest of the epic poems, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, those poems about sailing and venturing to go and to try to accomplish something great. Finally, at 3b, and again, our challenge here is always, can I stumble onto an idea that I can own that works for me? How about this one? What has been your ship starting? What has it been? What great things have you tried to accomplish? And sustained will is our challenge, back to our Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. Conscience makes cowards of us all. It's not enough to say I'm gonna do what X or Y, but to actually do it. But to get in the ship, to sail, to go ahead and go. Maybe the study of these poems, as we've said, is going to remind us that the journey is way more important than the destination, as of course we learned from our study of Homer's Odyssey, a text that of course had to have been in Whitman's mind as he wrote this classic little poem. Thank you.